Our trip started at the Miami International Airport on Wednesday, July 1st in the afternoon. Our final destination was the Rusin Prague Airport, a modern and spacious international airport located on the northwest edge of Prague and around 17 kilometers north of the city. All international flights arrive here. However, Prague has 3 other small airports and several landing areas for helicopters located at airports and in hospital compounds. The journey from the airport to the city center takes around 25 to 30 minutes, or around 50 minutes by public transportation. Since the new Terminal 2 was opened, new facilities have increased and passenger comfort has also been improved. The 5-star Hilton Hotel in Prague is an impressive glass, futuristic building. Located next to the Vltava River, the Hilton is within walking distance of Prague's main attractions. The hotel is a 15-minute walk from both the Old Town Square and Wenceslaw Square. The Prague Hilton is the biggest hotel in the Czech Republic and one of the largest Hilton hotels in Europe. All the sights and attractions of the city are within walking distance. True to form, Isabel made her first purchase at the Hilton Prague Hotel store even before we had checked in. She bought a beautiful crystal glass for her collection. Happy hour at the hotel lobby. The famous Charles Bridge, a historical bridge that crosses the Vltava River in Prague. Its construction started in 1357 under the auspices of King Charles IV and finished in the beginning of the 15th century. As the only means of crossing the river Vltava, Moldau, the Charles Bridge used to be the most important connection between the old town, Prague Castle, and adjacent areas until 1841. Also, this solid land connection made Prague important as a trade route between Eastern and Western Europe. The bridge was originally called the Stone Bridge or the Prague Bridge, but has been the Charles Bridge since 1870. The bridge is 516 meters long and nearly 10 meters wide, resting on 16 arches shielded by ice guards. It is protected by 3 bridge towers, 2 of them on the lesser quarter side and the 3rd one on the Old Town side. The Old Town Bridge Tower is often considered to be one of the most astonishing civil Gothic style buildings in the world. The bridge is decorated by a continuous alley of 30 statues and statuaries, most of them Baroque style, erected around 1700. They depict various saints and patron saints venerated at that time. The most prominent Bohemian sculptures of the time took part in decorating the bridge. The statue of St. John of Nepomuk is particularly important to Prague's history. One of the oldest statues on Charles Bridge, this statue was placed on the bridge in 1683 to commemorate the saint. St. John of Nepomuk was a religious figure in St. Wenceslaus' court in the 14th century, but was thrown from Charles Bridge to his death in the Vltava River. Saint Adalbert, the first bishop of Bohemia, is blessing the Czech land after returning from Rome. Saint Lutgard, Saint Cyril and Saint Methodius. These Catholic missionaries are credited with introducing Christianity to the Slavs. A 17th century crucifix. The Madonna, Saint Dominic and Saint Thomas. The puppeteer and his puppet entertaining the tourists. The reliefs below the statue of St. John of Nepomuk illustrate scenes from his life. Legend says that good luck and the promise of a return trip to Prague comes to those who touch those reliefs. Rosita did not miss the opportunity to do so. Views of the Prague Castle and the Manesuk Bridge over the Vltava River captured from the Charles Bridge. Pretty views of the old town area taken from the Charles Bridge as well. Walking along the Vltava river banks near the Charles Bridge. The stairs leading to Kampa Island from the Charles Bridge. A quaint corner where we stopped for ice cream. View of a canal next to the cafe restaurant Marnice from the Charles Bridge. A bride and groom walking down a street in the Charles Bridge area. The bride and groom kissing for the paparazzi next to a puppeteer shop. Picture of the nice policewoman who helped us find a taxi to go back to the hotel. Lunch al fresco on a sunny day in Prague. Goulash for everybody. Salud por eso. Mosteca Street and the Church of St. Nicholas in the background. Taking a well-deserved coffee break at one of the many coffee shops along the Mosteca Street. The lesser town square lies at the heart of the Mala Strana and has been the hub of this side of Prague since the 10th century. The ancient heart of the Mala Strana district centers around two small squares, both surrounded by buildings of considerable architectural importance. The upper square contains the 18th century block column with sculptures reproducing the Holy Trinity and the patron saints of Bohemia. The lower square also serves as the main tram stop for Mala Strana. From here you can go in on one direction to Wenceslaus Square and in the other to Hradčany at the back of the Prague Castle. The St. Nicholas Church and Tower. At the center of the square is the magnificent St. Nicholas Church, Mala Strana's primary landmark. All around are a mixture of restaurants, quaint old pubs, small shops, and a host of international embassies housed in the wonderful old buildings. A view of the nave reveals the opulent decorations and furnishings. A statue of St. Nicholas above the main altar. Ove and Rosita climbed the 215 steps to the top of the St. Nicholas Tower to enjoy the wonderful views of Prague. View of the Mosteca Street and the Charles Bridge Tower. The Prague Castle's South Gardens. In the background, the Church of Our Lady of Teen. The Strahov Monastery. Knights of the Cross Square opens out from the eastern end of Charles Bridge. It was created in the 16th century and was part of the route followed by the coronation processions of the Bohemian sovereigns. It is distinguished by the statue of Charles IV, cast in iron in the first half of the 19th century. Baroque Church of St. Francis Seraphicus at the Knights of the Cross Square. The dome bears a fresco of the Last Judgment from the 18th century. The Church of the Holy Savior is a Jesuit temple built between the 16th and 17th centuries in Renaissance style. The old town square is the thriving heart of Old Prague. Its historical importance on the right bank of the Vltava can be compared to that of the castle on the opposite side of the river. The old town square is not merely an impressive blend of architectural styles and monuments. It represents the very essence of the city itself. It has been the setting for the many events, both happy and tragic, which have marked Prague's long history. In 1422, the preacher Selivsky was executed here. In 1621, the leaders of the Protestant revolt were executed. In 1915, the bronze Jan Hus monument was inaugurated on the occasion of the 5th centenary of his death. In 1945, the people of Prague joyfully welcomed the Soviet army at the end of the Second World War. In 1968, the crowd bombarded Soviet tanks with Molotov cocktails for shattering the dreams of the Prague Spring, and the Hus monument was built as a sign of mourning. Also in the old town square is the House of the Minute, richly decorated with sgraffito work. Different transportation modes around the square. Jugglers and musicians brightened the city, offering a typically Parisian image. Rosita and Ove enjoying the great views from the old town hall tower. Wonderful view of the city that seems dominated by the spires of the bell towers of the Church of Our Lady of Teen. The monument to John Hus stands in the center of Old Town Square. It was sculpted by Ladislav Salon and unveiled in July 1915 on the 500th anniversary of Hus's death. Jan Hus was a Czech theologian and preacher who became rector of Charles University in 1403. He drew attention to the poor social conditions in the city and criticized the funding of papal wars. He was tried for heresy in 1415 and burnt at the stake, thus becoming a Czech martyr and national hero whose death is celebrated with a national holiday on July 6th each year. The Church of St. Nicholas in Stare Mesto, a masterpiece of Baroque architecture, was built in the first half of the 18th century by K.I. Dienstenhofer. The history of the old town hall begins in the 12th century and continues uninterrupted through various periods of extension, damage, destruction and reconstruction, right up until the last restoration work carried out between 1978 and 1981. The tower was added in 1364. There is a charming view from the top of the 69th meter high Old Town Hall Tower, which can be reached by lift. The clock was built by Master Mikulas of Kadan and was mounted in the lower part of the Old Town Hall Tower at the beginning of the 15th century. At the end of the century, Master Hanus of Rus was responsible for its rebuilding, and in the second half of the 16th century it was perfected and enlarged. The upper face of the astronomical clock showing the Bohemian time, real time, the visible portion of the sky divided into 12 parts, and the paths of the sun and moon through the 12 signs of the zodiac. The figures of the sides of the upper face represent vanity, greed, death, and lust. Every hour the charming procession of apostles appears with its eloquent allegories, attracting the surprised attention of tourists and visitors who crowd around in the attractive little square below. The town hall was established as a symbol of self-administration for the first Prague town in 1338 and enlarged in later years. The public has access to the historical representative halls. The Gothic chapel with a view of the apostles of the astronomical clock are part of the old town hall and tower. While on a guided tour of the old town hall, we had the opportunity to view the figures of the 12 apostles of the astronomical clock. Colorful frescoes adorn the walls of the rooms of the old town hall building. The public also has access to the subterraneous areas from the 12th and 13th centuries with an allusive exhibition of that time. The Golskinsky Palace, the first building to the left, the house at the Stone Bell next to the Golskinsky Palace, and the Church of Our Lady of Teen. This mighty construction, one of the capital's most famous symbols, rises high above the rooftops of Old Prague. The lights create surreal, fantastic, almost fairy tale dimensions on the facades of the handsome buildings and up towards the incredible spires of the Church of Our Lady of Teen. The Powder Tower is one of the most famous monuments in the Czech capital. The name of the tower derives from a gunpowder store located here in the 18th century. The late Gothic structure was built in the second half of the 15th century. The municipal house is an outstanding example of the Art Nouveau style. This most spectacular building in Prague is also one of the most important historical buildings in the whole country. It was erected between 1905 and 1911 on the site of what had been a royal residence abandoned for centuries. Prague Castle is the largest medieval castle complex in Europe and the ancient seat of Czech kings throughout the ages. It is Prague's premier tourist attraction. Several destructive wars and fires, along with differing political forces, have combined to create an intriguing mix of palaces, churches and fortifications. The Prague Castle complex consists of St. Vitus Cathedral, viewing towers, museums and art galleries, a monastery, Golden Lane, several palaces and St. George's Basilica. Giant's Gate is the main entrance to the castle from the Grat Cani Square. The name of the gate is derived from the gigantic figures which dominate the pillars at the entrance built between 1770 and 1771. The castle gate leads into the ceremonial court. For centuries, a small group of guards has protected the safety of the castle, though today they wear elegant modern uniforms newly designed in 1989 by Theodor Pistek. Life was rather more difficult in the past, in particular in the 18th century, when, only paid with free lodging and wood for their fire for warmth, they were reduced to only 24 men with barely 3 bullets each. The institution of the castle guards survived, however, and even now every day on the hour from 5 in the morning until 11 at night, the changing of the guard is performed in front of the gates. The most spectacular of these ceremonies, however, takes place around midday under the eyes of an admiring public, complete with brass fanfares and the exchange of flags. Matthias Gate, preceded by 2 lofty flagstaffs 25 meters high, originally made from the trunk of a single fir tree from Moravia, wedged between the buildings of the west wing. The 17th century Matthias Gate leads to the second courtyard. Access to the various rooms of the splendid west wing is from here via the 2 stairways that lead out to the entranceway. The second courtyard with the elegant Baroque fountain and an old well. Third courtyard with the old Provost's house, the Cathedral of St. Vitus and a wing of the Royal Palace. The equestrian statue of St. George, patron of soldiers and knights. This is a copy of the 14th century bronze statue that now stands inside the Royal Palace. The awe-inspiring main facade of the Cathedral of St. Vitus. The history of Prague Cathedral, the true spiritual center of the entire country, is lengthy and complex. In 925, where this impressive monument now stands, St. Wenceslaus built the small circular Romanesque structure of St. Vitus, his future burial place. It was only in 1929, 1,000 years after the death of St. Wenceslaus, that the cathedral, with its imperious stature and interwoven buttresses, so characteristic of the most perfect Gothic architecture, could finally be said to be finished. Elaborate scenes from the Passion of Christ decorate the lunettes above the central door. Views of the south facade of the cathedral, showing the impressive tower crowned by a Baroque cupola. The south facade is almost considered to be the main entrance to the great cathedral, and indeed for centuries it was the only one to provide access. The 14th century south facade is embellished with a magnificent golden door, crowned by a mosaic of the Last Judgment, made about 1370. The three arches of the entrance lead to the renowned and beautifully decorated stone vestibule. The splendid apse, decorated with spires and pinnacles, is illuminated by stained glass windows and surrounded by chapels in the French Gothic style. The lofty central nave of the cathedral, enhanced with unusual interlacing in the vault. The interior of St. Peter's Cathedral is austere, unadorned but harmonious. Light filters through the large stained glass windows. The glowing rose window and the brightly colored stained glass windows in the apse. The north transept is occupied by a huge two-story organ. A beautifully decorated pulpit. The main altar and the royal mausoleum. The imposing royal mausoleum with sculptural figures of Ferdinand I and Anna Jagiellonsky and their son Maximilian II. The much-stained glass window depicts scenes from the lives of Saints Cyril and Methodius, who brought Christianity to the Slavic area. It also shows Saint Wenceslaus kneeling next to his grandmother, Saint Ludmila. The magnificent silver funerary monument to Saint John of Nepomuk, dominated by the figure of the kneeling saint holding a crucifix. The tomb of St. Vitus with the 19th century sandstone statue by Emanuel Max. Statue of Cardinal Bedřich Schwarzenberg, Archbishop of Prague, 1892-1895. Christ on the Cross, one of the finest works of modern art in the cathedral. The huge and spectacular Vladislav Hall, dating from the time of Charles IV. Some 62 meters long, 16 meters wide, and 13 meters high, built between 1492 and 1502. It was the largest room in Europe at the time. Large enough indeed to house, as well as the usual ceremonies, equestrian tournaments, and even a market. The hall was greatly admired, especially for the extraordinary design of the groins and the highly elegant star-shaped curved vault, and the excellent light provided by the large windows, clearly of early Renaissance inspiration. The facade of the Basilica of St. George. St. George's was originally the main square in the castle and, before the building of the cathedral, was much larger than today. Prince Vratislav I had a single-nave church built here in 920, consecrated in 925, and destined to house the remains of the first Czech martyr, his mother, Princess Ludmila, who was canonized shortly after and was also the grandmother of another future saint, Wenceslas, the son of Bratislav. The basilica consists of 3 naves, 3 apses to the east, and 2 crypts. The chapel built to house the remains of the saint dates from the 13th century and is located on the south side of the Romanesque apse. The National Gallery in Prague. Since 1975, on the first floor, the monastery has housed the section of the National Gallery in Prague dedicated to the Mannerist paintings belonging to the court of Rudolf II, as well as Bohemian Baroque works of the 17th and 18th centuries, with works of art by H. von Aken, Spranger, A. de Vries, P. Brandl, V. Reiner, and M. Brown. Running in a west-to-east direction behind St. George's Monastery, this picturesque and romantic little street, also known as Alchemist's Lane, is an obligatory port of call for visitors to the castle and represents the tradition of Prague as a magical city. Today, the little houses that once were craftsmen's workshops and dwellings for the poor are attractive shops where souvenirs and artistic and crafts items can be bought. A gallery displaying a collection of ancient armors and clothing runs over the cottages in the Golden Lane. Closing the castle and its fortifications on the west are a gate and tower, both interesting remains of what were the Romanesque walls dating from the mid-12th century. The Black Tower was originally known as the Golden Tower after the polished gilding of the roof that glistened at the time of Charles IV, but it was a victim of the 1541 fire, which definitively destroyed the gilding and gave rise to its current name. However, the Black Tower was part of the Burgrave's buildings and was for long used as the prison where condemned debtors were held. The Curse of the Gold, 1000 Years Inca Gold Exhibition at the Prague Castle. Statue adorning one of the many courtyards. The Noble Women's Institute seen from the garden on the ramparts. The famous Lion's Court. At the back of this courtyard lie the splendid royal gardens. Queen Anne's Summer Palace and the 16th century singing fountain, also known as the Belvedere for its wonderful view. This palace has an unusual roof shaped like the keel of a boat and is surrounded by delightful airy arches. It is difficult to imagine that this pretty, delicate building was destined to be used as a barracks and army workshop for almost a century between the 1700s and the 1800s. The large Real Tennis Pavilion, the oldest stone building of its kind in Europe. It was built in 1569. The Mijulka Powder Tower, having a diameter of 20 meters and 44 meters high, comes from the 15th century and is part of the castle fortification. It used to serve as a gunpowder depot. Now it houses new permanent exhibitions, an armory presenting several periods of the military history on the Czech territory. This charming square, given a certain dignity by the Baroque buildings which overlook it, has always formed the entrance to the castle. The stern statue of Masaryk looks down on the Hradčany square. Adorning the square is the 18th century plaque column. Elegant architecture defines the Archbishop's Palace. The Schwarzenberg Palace, the building as it is today, is in fine Renaissance style, clearly imitating northern Italian prototypes. The Tuscan Palace, an early Baroque style building, was erected at the end of the 17th century. Lovely view of the St. Nicholas Church and Tower. the background, the Strahov Monastery. The old castle stairway, a romantic and almost legendary part of Prague, celebrated in popular songs, which leads down into the city from the east gate. Taking a break for lunch to enjoy yet another delicious goulash. The origins of the Loreto Sanctuary, which ranks as one of the most visited religious destinations and places of pilgrimage in the whole of Bohemia, date back to the 18th century. Following the Counter-Reformation, a great number of sanctuaries modeled on the one in Loreto were built in order to promote Catholicism in previously Protestant areas. The Baroque bell tower houses a set of 27 bells which ring out in honor of the Virgin every hour. The main entrance is distinguished by the statues of saints and the marble coat of arms which stand above it. The Chernin Palace, now the seat of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the distinguishing marks of this majestic building are its imposing size and the massive colonnade which runs the length of the facade. Following are pictures of quaint streets as we headed down to the city without having to take the old castle stairway. Lovely watercolor painting of the Charles Bridge. Taking the subway to go from the Hilton Hotel to the Old Town area was easy. At the subway station with friends Carmen and Kurt. Ove and Rosita on the Manesov Most Bridge with the Prague Castle complex in the background. The Charles Bridge and the Old Tower. The Prague Castle and the Manesov Bridge. The Chechov Bridge. On the Manesov Bridge. The Prague Castle at night. The Stare Mesto Tower and the statue of Charles IV at the Knight of the Cross Square. The Baroque facade of the Church of the Holy Saviour is decorated with 13 statues and 5 vases. Having a bite to eat al fresco in the Old Town area. Salud por eso! Our first glimpse of the fantastic Old Town Square at night. On the evening of July 3rd, Isabel and Jaime took a just river cruise along the Vltava River, and following are some of the pictures they took. The last day in Prague, Las Hermanitas treated themselves to a ballet recital. The theater was across the street from the municipal house. Having a coffee after the performance.